In the ceaseless, turbulent current of human history, there are chapters of tragedy, grim narratives that, when opened, send shivers down one's spine. Not because of fierce battles, bloody revolutions, or devastating natural disasters, but because of the sheer madness, the utter corruption of a single individual, a person transformed into a monster by power. Can you believe that in our modern 20th century, a president would literally place a glittering crown upon his own head, declare himself emperor, and turn an entire nation into a colossal stage for his personal delusion? This isn't fiction, this is a true story, about one of the most eccentric and brutal figures in African history, Jean-Bédel Bokassa, and his so-called Central African Empire, an entity that existed for barely 2 years but left an indelible, gaping wound. Our story begins not in a golden palace, but in the nascent Central African Republic. A nation that had just broken free from the colonial shackles of France in 1960, facing myriad challenges inherent to newfound independence. This land was deficient in every aspect, from infrastructure, healthcare, and education to a stable economy. Amidst this volatile backdrop, a soldier rose, carrying both ambition and an ominous, unpredictable obsession, Jean-Bédel Bokassa. He was not an aristocrat, nor did he come from the elite. Bokassa began his military career from scratch, serving in the French colonial army. For 23 long years, he endured harsh battlefields in Indochina and Algeria. It was in this disciplined, yet equally brutal, military environment that Bokassa learned the lessons of power all too deeply. He climbed the ranks from a private to a captain, and more importantly, he learned how to use force, how to suppress, and how to manipulate to achieve his goals. When the Central African Republic gained independence, Bokassa returned home, bringing with him combat experience and a burning ambition. He was quickly promoted to Chief of Staff of the Army, a pivotal position of power. It was the fateful New Year's Eve of 1966. The capital, Bangui, was immersed in the quietude of the old year's final hours, but that silence was brutally shattered. Gunshots echoed everywhere. A swift, unexpected coup d'état overthrew President David Dacko, ironically, Bokassa's own cousin, the very man who had elevated Bokassa to the highest military position. From that moment on, absolute power rested firmly in Jean-Bédel Bokassa's iron grip. The twilight of the old year had dawned, a dark new day for the Central African Republic, and a brutal dictatorship officially began. The early years under Bokassa's rule were an unending dark period. He imposed a totalitarian dictatorship where all dissenting voices were mercilessly silenced. The press was heavily censored, political parties were banned, and anyone who dared to speak out against him mysteriously vanished, leaving no trace. Arbitrary arrests, savage torture, and secret executions became a constant, haunting presence in the minds of the people. Bokassa viewed the entire nation as his personal property, a gigantic toy where every resource, from the national treasury to every grain of rice consumed by the citizens, had to serve his extravagance and boundless desires. While Bokassa lived in luxury, enjoying a lavish life with extravagant parties, expensive car collections, and millions of dollars spent on international trips, the people of the Central African Republic plunged deeper into abject poverty. The economy was ruined by rampant corruption, development projects stalled, barren fields lay uncultivated, and schools desperately lacked everything: no books, no teachers. The future of an entire generation was abandoned. The contrast between the dictator's imperial life and the people's destitution became increasingly stark, painfully so. But Bokassa's ambition, it seemed, had not yet reached its limit. He wanted more, something grander, an empire of his own, a title nobler than mere president, that of emperor. Deeply obsessed with the figure of Napoleon Bonaparte, the great French emperor, Bokassa harbored a mad and unrealistic idea: to crown himself emperor. It seemed he had meticulously studied Napoleon, from his manner of dress and behavior to the very coronation rituals. Everything had to be grandiose, truly magnificent, surpassing any ceremony ever held in Africa. Bokassa believed that crowning himself emperor would grant him the respect, prestige, and absolute power he so desperately craved. And so, on December 4, 1977, the entire world watched in astonishment one of the most absurd and costly coronations in modern history. Imagine this: $20 million, an astronomical sum, a blatant insult, equivalent to a quarter of the entire national budget at the time, was poured into this frivolous event. That money could have built hundreds of schools, hospitals, or developed agriculture to save millions of starving people. But no, it was used to import gold, precious velvets from Europe, hundreds of specially trained horses, and a multi-million-dollar crown, glittering with diamonds. All to serve the illusion of an empire on paper, a lavish and utterly meaningless spectacle. It was a stark, heartbreaking contrast, a slap in the face of the people's utter misery. However, the peak of his cruelty didn't end with that extravagant coronation. It was in 1979, just 2 years after crowning himself emperor, when blood stained the streets of Bangkok, brutally and inhumanely. Innocent school children, children still in their classrooms, took to the streets to protest an absurd regulation. They were forced to buy expensive school uniforms, uniforms exclusively manufactured by Bokassa's own family. This wasn't just a small protest, it was a cry for help, an act of resistance from an entire oppressed generation. But in response to that plea, there was a brutal massacre, an indelible stain on human history. Hundreds of students, including children under 10, were arrested, savagely beaten, and massacred in prison. Children, the future of the nation, were savagely and coldly slaughtered by the very leader of their country. This incident sent shockwaves across the globe, and it was the final straw. The massacre of the school children was the ultimate breaking point. The international community, already weary of Bokassa's eccentricity and brutality, was now utterly outraged. France, the former colonial power, once a close ally of Bokassa, could no longer turn a blind eye to this heinous crime. They realized that Bokassa had become a burden, a disgrace to the entire region. In September 1977, Operation Barracuda was launched, a swift and decisive military intervention. From the skies over Bangkok, French aircraft appeared, carrying the hope of ending the terrifying nightmare of a phantom empire. There was no significant resistance. Bokassa, the self-proclaimed great emperor, fled to Côte d'Ivoire, ending a brutal and ridiculous reign that lasted less than 2 years. Bokassa was overthrown. His nascent and delusional empire utterly collapsed. Eventually, he was extradited back to the Central African Republic, to face justice. In a dramatic trial, he was convicted of numerous charges, including murder, torture, and embezzlement of public funds. Although there were later complex legal developments, the final verdict exposed the true face of the dictator. The name Jean-Bédel Bokassa has gone down in history as a symbol of madness, tyranny, and unimaginable waste. He left behind not only a devastated nation and a shattered economy, but also an indelible scar on the souls of the Central African people. His legacy is one of prolonged political instability, deep-seated distrust in leaders, and the lingering pain of the victims. Although there were later complex legal developments, the final verdict exposed the true face of the dictator. The name Jean-Bédel Bokassa has gone down in history as a symbol of madness, tyranny, and unimaginable waste. He left behind not only a devastated nation and a shattered economy, but also an indelible scar on the souls of the Central African people. His legacy is one of prolonged political instability, deep-seated distrust in leaders, and the lingering pain of the victims. Will history repeat itself? What lessons can we truly learn from this tragic and haunting tale to build a better future, where power serves humanity rather than being an instrument of tyranny? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to explore more strange, poignant, and meaningful pages of history.